Hey, everybody, welcome back to the American Justice Podcast. I can't believe we are in the middle of, we've already selected our second season, but we're in the middle of producing it and investigating it. And we are super excited to bring that season to you. There's going to be all kinds of more information about another person that we are completely convinced was wrongfully convicted. And that's going to be coming up real soon. We'll let you know when the exact release date is going to be, but we're good. We're getting through it. We're getting it done. But we have a gentleman here that has a kind of another aspect of the law and kind of true crime that we're going to discuss for the next few minutes. That I'll let him introduce himself and let him tell us kind of what's going on in his life and what brought him to where he's at. Mr. Bruce McLaughlin, go ahead, sir.
Well, Scott, thank you very much. I have heard a bit about American Justice. I think what you guys are doing is absolutely wonderful. And I do want to tell you that my case is resolved, unlike the case with Brandon, whose case is not yet resolved favorably. My case resulted in charges involving my having sexually abused my own children, two boys who then were 7 and 9, and two twin girls who were 5. Sexually abusing them in what is considered to be the worst way possible. And I ended up being convicted by a jury in Loudoun County, Virginia, to 13 years imprisonment. I was able to find new evidence as a result of what prosecutors had withheld in the form of crib notes written by their mother. In this case, we were in the middle of a divorce. She's from New Zealand. Her lawyer told her, look, if you can find any evidence regarding sexual abuse, that's a free ticket to New Zealand with your kids. My two boys had indicated earlier that they wanted to live with me. And unbeknownst to me, then she mounted this suggestibility campaign to alienate them from me over the course of what was almost a year, to convince them that abuse had occurred when none of that was true. These crib notes were used by her so that she and the criminal investigator assigned to the case with no experience, and the Child Protective Services, who violated their own rules and not recording all the interviews, to show that the children were making statements that were different. And usually people who are not telling the truth or don't think that they are telling the truth are going to say different things. Be that as it may, I did not have that evidence going into the first trial. I was able to get that evidence back before the same court on a habeas petition after my direct appeals were exhausted. And that habeas petition resulted in a hearing from an appointed judge from the Virginia Supreme Court, now deceased. That was a gentleman who ruled that I was, in fact, denied key evidence in the form of these crib notes and also doctored transcripts showing things that the children did not say as if they had said them. That resulted in my second trial before a jury in the same jurisdiction. And that second trial resulted in a full acquittal. And I've written a book called He Said, She Said, said being capitalized on the she said part, sexual allegations and divorce. And then he went to jail as a result of this. Part of my book also involves telling the story about how judges, juries, the population in general needs to know that when you have power adults in a divorce or a custody situation, prevailing upon or suggesting to children that they should say certain things, those kinds of cases are 80% false, such as mine. Whereas in a normal situation, children don't usually not tell the truth. We know this intuitively as people, but if you add that nuance of someone who is in a divorce situation, where my boys went to my ex and said, "We want to really live with Dad," there was motivation for this woman to do what she did, and I ended up with a conviction. And then subsequently, 4 years and 3 months later, after serving time in the Virginia State Penitentiary, Supermax Penitentiary, I was able to show that the evidence that was subsequently obtained would have changed the outcome of the case, which is a key Supreme Court case called Strickland versus Washington. And as a result, I was given that new trial, and fortunately, I was acquitted by a jury of my peers.
Yeah, I always find that that's interesting that, that people are not automatically suspicious of, we've been married for, 15 years and there's never ever been any kind of allegations before. And now all of a sudden we're going through a custody battle and lo and behold, there's these allegations. Like that just seems to me that that would be such a high suspicion situation. It's a lot different than, mommy and daddy are happily married and, they're going to live their life together. And all of a sudden, 4-year-old comes forward and says, mommy touched me or daddy touched me. That seems a lot different situation than being in the middle of a divorce battle.
You're absolutely right, Scott. And yet, when you're in the moment and the jury is looking at witnesses testify, and they hear a child say, mommy did this or daddy did that, and they are fairly nervous and fairly scared, not because necessarily this happened to them, but because it's a very intimidating environment being in a courtroom. And so it's very easy to confuse juries. And look, I'm an attorney. I'm practicing in the same jurisdiction in Virginia because I've made it a point to try and pay forward what happened to me by representing criminal defendants as well as other cases in these kinds of scenarios and others. If it can happen to an attorney, as you know, people are wrongfully convicted on a daily basis.
Right.
And it needs people like us who are willing to stand in the gap for innocent people to be able to right the ship.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm glad that that you're able to write that book and put those words kind of down on paper to kind of let people know about these situations. Tell us a little bit about some of the changes that you've been able to help along or inspire or whatever in the legislature.
Well, Scott, thanks for asking that question. I am very much like you are interested in reform in the judicial world. Virginia judicial reform is right now something that is very important to me. I've been down to the legislature to talk to the General Assembly about changing the discovery rules in Virginia, where you have to now have, we're asking for an open file discovery, which means that your defense lawyers can go in and look at all the evidence in a particular case, good, bad, ugly, and determine how best to represent you. In Virginia, for so many years, and even currently, you can go to trial and suffer trial by ambush because certain evidence in a prosecutor's mind might be something that they need not turn over. And with these crib notes, for instance, the prosecutors felt that those weren't exculpatory. And in fact, the Supreme Court cases say that if it's exculpatory, you have to turn it over, meaning it would possibly help the defense.
Right.
In this case, though, the prosecutor made the decision himself. The fox was guarding the hen house,
Right.
and I ended up with no notes.
Right.
And so that area of the law, open file discovery, is one issue that is currently before a now democratically controlled legislature for the first time in 50 years in Virginia. The death penalty has been abolished in Virginia. And the death penalty is something that's very important to me because of institutionalized racism in the South.
Mm-hmm.
As we all know, slavery was a key issue here that led to the Civil War. The death penalty is related to that because in Virginia, as in some of these southern states, it used to be that depending upon your color, you were given different punishment until it was abolished with equal protection. But the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. But what happened was we used to sentence a black man who killed a white woman to death, whereas a white man killing a black woman or a white woman was sentenced to life as a maximum. That was actually institutionalized in the system until they changed the law. Well, you don't have institutionalized racism in Virginia anymore, but you do have de facto racism. We all know that because of the post-George Floyd era. And white juries and certain judges still carry baggage that needs to be changed. So by the legislature now abolishing the death penalty, we do away with any chance that someone who is innocent, who happens to be of color, may very well have to go on death row. And I have to say, Texas and Virginia are the two states that have executed more people in the last 30 years than any other states, and certainly most countries.
Yeah.
Those are some of the issues. We're now looking at other issues as well. Part of my book's focus is how do we change the laws in Virginia to be able to avoid the situation where an innocent man has to go through and serve 4 years and 3 months, as I did, or as Brandon, in your case, is now serving 15 years for.
And I think that open file discovery is such an important issue because, you're exactly right. The prosecutor, all he has to do is, if something is discovered, is come back and say, I didn't think that it was exculpatory. And, one of the things that most people that are really not involved in the law don't understand is, the prosecutor is really only obligated to turn over, other than this exculpatory information, he's really only obligated to turn over what he's going to use at trial. So there may be other evidence, the investigators may have gone and done other investigation. Well, we're not going to call that investigator, so we don't have to turn over his notes. And, as long as there's, from an honest prosecutor, as long as there's nothing in there that's exculpatory, they don't have to turn it over. Whereas with an open file policy, what you just said is exactly correct. The defense has the opportunity to go in and examine everything that the prosecutor has. And that's very important. It's one of the things that we're trying to work towards here in Texas, as far as having that opportunity whenever a felony defendant's appeals have been exhausted. Can you tell us a little bit? One of the things I know that you brought up was kind of trying to coach parents, or trying to help parents be prepared when they're going into, say, okay, I realize my partner and I are not going to be able to make this work. We're going to get divorced. There's kids involved. There's 3, 4, 5 kids, whatever, one kid. What do they need to be kind of thinking about, and how would they get prepared to go into that battle, for lack of a better word?
Well, first of all, don't take anything for granted. I felt, the system would right the ship, that I would be exonerated because I was innocent. I didn't have anything to fear. Um, and, the system does not always work. We have a wonderful system, don't get me wrong. If I was Russian or Chinese, I would not have gotten a new trial. I would not be free to talk to you today. But that said, our system is not perfect. And so you have to be aggressive in making sure that your lawyers do what they're supposed to do, making sure that if you can get to your children and you're not, forced by a no contact order like I was, to tell them. Don't be afraid to share with them. Look, if your mother is telling you that this happened, I'm telling you it never happened. Don't be afraid to talk about the elephant in the room, and help your children get the story from you that none of this is true. Because I think if they just have one side, they have a tendency to be suggested to. And eventually, Scott, what's called instilled memory kicks in, such as with my case. The longer you talk to a child over and over again about something happening, and they repeat it to the church, and they repeat it to the Child Protective Services, and they repeat it to the criminal investigator, and they repeat it to the prosecutor, they begin to start to believe it. It's instilled memory, but it's not real. Instilled memory can still have the same effect, as we know, of convincing a child that it's real as much as a real memory.
Right.
And there was the problem.
Yeah. We had a little bit of not necessarily um, not necessarily that particular thing, but we had a violation. There was a supposed murder weapon that was found in Brandon's case, and there was a friend of his that had seen the dagger that they said that they found. He had seen it before, several years prior, and described it to the investigators as, it was about a 5 or 6 inch handle or blade, and then maybe a 4 or 5 inch handle. So it was about a foot long. Well, the investigators find this sword, 2.5 years later, after Brandon's been in jail for 2.5 years, in the barn in their old house, and it's like this thing's like almost 2 feet tall, or 2 feet long, and they go to the friend that had seen it, several years ago, and they show him a picture of it that is on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And they say, "Is this it?" And he's looking at it like he hadn't seen it in 3 years. And, it's about a foot long. That's what I said it was. Sure. That looks like it to me, and not having, a lineup of 6 different daggers or anything like that. It was just, "Hey, here's this picture. Is this it?" He's like, "Yeah, I guess that's it." Well, they bring it out at trial. When he's testifying at trial, this thing's almost 2 feet long. And he's like, "Well, that does look a little bigger than than I remember." So there was a little bit of that kind of shenanigans going on, as far as trying to get people's memories a little manipulated, I guess, if you will.
Well, Scott, you raise an issue that's so much the problem in the American criminal justice system, and that is we have an adversarial system. So you're asking prosecutors to win cases for which they could be reelected, which happened in Virginia with me. At the same time, you're asking them to be fair, and you're asking them to want to be just. And the problem is that you get this fog of war thing. And you as a prosecutor go, well, it's really in the best interest for the people to have me lead this particular judicial system here in this county. So I'm going to do what I have to do. And people who do not have the same ethical makeup as maybe, someone who is very clear about it, they tend to slip and they tend to slide. And before you know it, the dagger is now 2 feet long. The kids have been, sodomized and raped, and in fact, that none of this happened.
Yeah.
Because of the adversarial system, you have to have an aggressive lawyer. That's one of the things that's very important for you to have.
Yeah.
And point out the fallacies of the other guy who is manipulating the system when he does that.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the process that you had to go through fighting this from jail, like being in prison and trying to fight kind of from the inside? I think you had a little bit more of an advantage because you already knew the law. But you know, somebody that's even, I'm sure you felt like your hands were tied, you know, as far as what you were able to do. But can you kind of explain to us that process of what you had to go through to get this new evidence?
The answer to it is I had some friends who were willing to do a lot of the groundwork for me to go, do some evidentiary work in trying to help me uh, get good transcripts properly recorded from the recordings that were improperly made as the evidence in my first case. They were helpful in having me file a Hague petition with the International Hague, under the International Hague Treaty, to get a petition together to go before the New Zealand authorities, where my children had been wrongfully taken by my ex-wife, to have the New Zealand authorities under that treaty bring the children back to the United States. I was able to have the good fortune to have a mother who put quite a bit of money into getting a legal team assembled with an aggressive lawyer, as I pointed out to you earlier, who was willing to stand up, file the habeas petition, get the right people involved, and use the evidence that we were getting in order to put that before the court to get a new trial. And ultimately, then that same attorney was able to get an acquittal for me before a second jury.
So what was the process like? How did you actually get the district attorney to open up their file to be able to find these exculpatory notes?
Well, that was interesting because we had a parallel case for before the Child Protective Services to overturn findings of abuse, and that civil case led me to get discovery in the form of the notes and the recordings that we were not able to get in the criminal case.
Okay.
And I'm told that in Texas, they don't turn over the file ultimately until you've exhausted all of your appeals, which sounds to me to be draconian, honestly. And in Virginia, it's probably the same situation in large part. You know, we were talking about this issue before. You mentioned how you were not able to get all of the evidence for Brandon. The reality is that the police, the prosecutor's clients, are the ones that do the original work at a crime scene. And they're the ones that take all the evidence. And they're the ones that package it up. And they're the ones that test it. And they use what works for them. And they don't use what doesn't work.
Right.
And this open file discovery is important because these witnesses that are interviewed, or these experts that come up with results that we don't particularly think are appropriate as a prosecutor to win our case, should be seen by the defense and not delayed until after all your appeals are done and you're sitting 15 years in prison.
Right.
That is got to be changed.
Yeah, there's so many people out there that are doing such good work in trying to change some of these laws. And, you know, the problem is that you're trying to really change the laws within the system. And, you know, you've got a whole system of prosecutors and investigators and all these people that don't want to change the system. And a lot of your lawmakers are former attorneys, former prosecutors that, you know, so luckily in Brandon's case, we actually do have a state representative that is on board with Brandon's innocence. He's trying to help us in any way that he can. He's made some appearances and just done all kinds of good stuff as far as us trying to promote the podcast and the upcoming docuseries. So, you know, not everybody is fortunate to have that kind of power on their team, but you know, but you're right. The trying to get that system change is very difficult. But you know, all you can do is take it one step at a time, right?
One step at a time, Scott. And it's interesting you mentioned that with the representative who's helping in Brandon's case. We are changing the makeup of our legislature here in Virginia based upon the last election. And that is now primarily a Democratic legislature. The Democratic legislature is wanting to make some of these reforms finally. And I mentioned the death penalty as one of them. Minimum mandatory jail sentences is another.
Yeah.
The discovery rules being so arcane that they are being another. And these rules, these laws have to be changed to protect innocent people, because it's far better that we protect innocent people and let an occasional guilty person go free than the reverse.
Who was that? Sir William Blackstone, right? Better that 10 guilty men go free than one innocent imprisoned, or something like that. I think I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he says. And it's, you know, it's true. And if you ask a lot of people, I mean, I don't want to get off into a tangent, but if you ask a lot of people, they don't believe that. They believe, well, you know, if one innocent person, but we got those 10 guilty people, you know, until it becomes them, right? Until they're sitting there screaming and trying to fight for their lives. But I
That's
do
right.
have one last question I want to ask you. But before I ask you that question, I just wanted to ask you, do you have anything else that you'd like to kind of explain to people, maybe you know, kind of about your book, or you know, just the process in general, anything that you think can help somebody that might be going through this, or might be helping someone go through this?
Well, I would thank you very much for that plug. I would like to encourage someone who is currently going through a divorce or a child custody battle, who is accused of abuse, either physical or sexual. I would encourage them to read my book, He Said, She Said, and Then He Went to Jail. Encourage them to get in touch with me. I'm happy to help them. As an attorney, I'm doing the very thing I'm doing to pay forward what happened to me. So in these kinds of cases, if you have a friend, or you have somebody who's been incarcerated, or you have somebody who is pending a trial, feel free to reach out and get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to get a chance to weigh in on what I would suggest that you do. And maybe, Scott, you can give them my contact information at some point in time.
Well, we'll put, I'll just make sure that we put all of your contact information in the show notes, and you know, along with the link to, I'm assuming you have the book on Amazon or something like that.
I do.
Yeah.
That book can be purchased on Amazon, but I can be contacted directly, and would love to make myself available for that purpose. Because I, like you for Brandon, and me for having been wrongfully accused, I want to help other people in this process. And look, there are a lot of people who are innocent who are behind bars, and you have to only look at the DNA Innocence Project to be able to confirm that hundreds of people have been in the same boat, and they have DNA evidence on their side. What happens if you don't have that?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly right. And so just to finish up, the question I wanted to ask you at the end is, I just kind of want to know, from somebody that's been through it and has had to fight and has had to sit at a trial, listening to somebody as close to you as your own children say all these things that are not true. What was that like personally, going through that? How did you even get through, you know, someone that's wrongfully accused, sitting there listening to a jury say guilty?
Scott, it's traumatic. It almost caused me to commit suicide when that jury came through with their verdict. I literally stood in a shower running with water in the jail, put one end of a towel around the shower bar and put the other end around my neck, and was about ready to kick the chair out from underneath my feet when a little still voice came to me and said, "Bruce, don't do that. I don't want you to do that. I love you too much." And I guess it was my faith that got me through this, Scott. So I have to give that credit to my Lord.
And I think that it's one of the things also, and because I can imagine that a lot of people that are wrongfully convicted go through that same process or that same emotion. And I think what may motivate them, at least to a certain extent, is that, if I do this and I die, I'll never have a chance to prove myself innocent. I'll never have a chance to clear my name, and people will go to their grave, thinking that I did this. And I think that would be powerful as well.
It certainly is. And remember, in my scenario, I had 4 innocent children who I wanted to fight for as well. And that was certainly one of the motivating factors for me to try and overturn this unfortunate first case.
Yeah. And I don't think we covered what year was this, and how old are your kids now, and what's your relationship like now?
Well, this case happened in 1998. And that was the first trial of guilty. The second trial came through in 2002, towards the end of the year. What a wonderful Christmas present that was. It took 5 years for me to get my licensure back, to begin to start to practice law in the very jurisdiction that had convicted me. And it took me about that same amount of time to rekindle the relationship that I had originally with my kids. I was a pretty good dad, very active, hands-on, a coach, dressed up as Santa Claus and went to school, during Christmas to act like I was there for the children as Saint Nick. And I read to the children. I put on German clothes for the German class and spoke German to them. I was an active, hands-on dad, and I just really loved the opportunity to rekindle that same special relationship with my children. Both of my girls live with me today. Their mother is sort of someone who is persona non grata, and I've encouraged my children to rekindle their relationship with her because she's always going to be their mother. My 2 boys are happily married, and they live in different parts of the country. I'm a grandfather 3 times over. So I'm pleased to say that sometimes things work out, and that's why I encourage you to continue to fight for Brandon.
We'll get there eventually. All right, Bruce. Well, thank you very much for taking all of this time. It's very interesting hearing about your story, and I think that a lot of people probably don't realize how often this goes on, and how difficult it can be to fight this type of thing. So I appreciate you coming on, giving us your own experience, and even offering some of your help with some of these other cases. So thanks for joining us on the American Justice Podcast.
Thanks very much, Scott, and keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you.